Welcome to the podcast. I'm Mijo Biscan. So today's episode is a very interesting, exciting episode. I spoke with Sean Willmore from the Thin Green Line Foundation. This is the Thin Green Line Foundation documentary. So Sean helps rangers in all over the world, but in Africa, who get shot and killed by poachers, and helps them and their families through his foundation. He's an amazing human being, and some actually very inspiring moments in this conversation. And one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to him is his love of music and the way he has synthesized music in with what he does in his foundation, using the power of music to obviously raise funds, but doing that through concerts and a very novel idea he has started called A Song for Change. And so, I hope you really enjoy it. His story is very inspiring. And I definitely feel like we're going to do another podcast in the future. I think we're just scratching the surface. So enjoy this conversation with Sean Willmore. I'm here with Sean Willmore. He's the founder of the Thin Green Line. And he's just an all-round champion, jolly fellow, excellent human. Welcome to this podcast.
Thank you, Mia. I'm not sure I can live up to all of that. we'll see how we go.
Yeah, you can. People, you have this magical ability to win people over. So
keeping them there is another thing, but okay, all right.
even presidents and potential presidents. Maybe we can talk about that story of meeting some people in America. But So one of the reasons I wanted to really chat to you was because I think you live in this interesting space between doing charity work in your foundation in Green Line and the world of music, and you've been able to bring them together in a really interesting way, and obviously using the power of music to raise funds for what you're doing, but also championing musicians and really supporting them. And that's why we're here hanging out.
It's an interesting meld of things, I suppose. Musicians often get asked to support charities, and charities often ask musicians to get involved, and where those two align is an interesting space.
Yeah. So maybe tell us just a little bit of your background of sort of how this journey started of the Thin Green Line.
It's I suppose an accidental beginning in some ways, but I was a park ranger, which wasn't an accident. I passionately wanted to work in the environment in some way, shape or form, and I did a science degree and had the chance to do some postgraduate studies and all of that stuff. But then after doing some practical work in a national park with rangers, that's kind of where my passion lies, is actually getting hands-on. Mm-hmm. And the role of a ranger, especially when I started, was very diverse. You went to everything from firefighting to rescues to visitor management to pest plant and pest animal management to wildlife rescue, just a whole plethora of things, and you never knew what was going to happen in the next hour. So it kept you interested and excited, and I loved the training up in different sectors. So I started off as a ranger and was very passionate doing that for about 12 or 13 years. And then I went to an international ranger congress and met rangers from all around the world at a congress actually at Wilson's Prom, where I used to work.
Oh, right.
And I didn't know this congress was happening, and I just kind of found out through a ranger friend, and it was booked out. And so I just went down there in my ute and slept in the back of the ute with the canvas canopy and got my registration, and just knew I had to be there for some reason. And I met my worldwide ranger family there, and they told amazing stories, like, being chased up trees by elephants and having lions in the tree above them while they're in the tree, and about clinging to cliff faces, chasing poachers, but then the tragic side of being shot by poachers and their friends and colleagues being killed by poachers, and animals sometimes themselves, and this other kind of world which I knew existed, but not to that extent. Anyway, something clicked in me, and I'd never been outside of Australia at that stage. I was 31 or 2. I'd done a lot of travelling in Australia, but never went from uni to work, and that was it. And so I decided to sell the car and remortgage the house, and I broke up with the fiance, and I tell everybody that wasn't my fault. It was definitely hers, but you can believe whichever side of that you like. Yep. But any which way, it was going to move on, and I decided to go around the world and make a film that I didn't know how to make. And the first country I was going to was where I couldn't speak the language, so it was making no sense at all.
Yeah.
And but to me, it was just what I had to do. And in fact, I sent an email to all the rangers from that Congress and said, "Look, I've got this idea to tell our story just with a video, a documentary, if you like, and raise some funds for the families of the fallen rangers." And every ranger, around the world just said, "Come," and I just stayed at their houses. They picked me up at airports. It was like family. It was amazing. And I spent the whole year traveling around the world having these wonderful experiences, being charged by elephants myself and climbing volcanoes and, being in big surf and, all sorts of nearly drowning in rapids in Costa Rica. Just a wonderful experience and a very lively experience. And, you never feel more alive when you're close to dying. So there's some of those experiences. But then I came back to make this film, and I was making the film, and I went to give the money to the International Ranger Federation, and they said, "We're not a charity arm, set up the charity arm." I started Thin Green Line because there was nobody out there looking after rangers and their families. And that was the essence of it. So, and serendipity played a part. I sat on a plane at that stage next to said g'day to a guy, and he happened to be a lawyer. "Oh, okay, I'll buy. What kind of law?" And he said, "Oh, it's a bit obscure." And I said, "Well, hit me." And he said, "I set up charitable organisations." And I went, "Oh, here we go."
Yeah.
And then I suppose what happened after there, to make a long story short, is I went over a waterfall and I've been going down the rapids ever since, coming up for breath, running this foundation. Yeah. And then, so the foundation exists now to do 4 things, and training, equipping fallen rangers, and advocating for rangers, and the music and everything all leads to just lifting the rangers up for their role in protecting nature. If I can put that in a kernel.
Yeah. Great. It's such an exciting journey. And so this is the Thin Green Line. I've got
the original film.
Original film. If people are interested in getting onto that, where's somewhere they can go check it out now?
Well, firstly, we have to explain what a DVD is to most people. It's a circular disc that goes in a machine. Although I suppose the retro hipsters will know what that is.
Yeah, that's right.
We'd have to put that on VHS, wouldn't we? So originally started on DVD. You can watch that online for free now. It's amazing how far things have come in such a short time. That was 2007 when that was released. And YouTube wasn't big enough at that time to put a full movie on.
Yeah.
I don't even know if YouTube existed. Maybe it was small.
You could only have like 10 minutes was like the max or something.
Yeah, maybe it was half an hour stretched, but they definitely couldn't put that on there. And so we sold DVDs. Yeah. And we asked people around the world, and you can see on the front cover there, we had people give music to the film. So John Butler, if you could hold that up again, Mijo.
David Rudd, Blue King Brown, Cousin Leonard, Tov, Paul Dillon, Bomber.
Yeah. They're just some of the musicians that gave songs to
really amazing, huge Australian artists in there.
Yeah, and that's where the connection with music really started. And what I was really amazed when I was making that film, Mijo, was I had some really exciting footage of a helicopter rescue in Canada, and I put this clip together of all the exciting scenes, and it was just video. But when I put a track to it, oh, man, it was just – I didn't do anything fantastic. I simply just put a track down without changing any levels to this. And it was Spiderbait's, one of Spiderbait's kind of songs. It was Take Me Back or something. Anyway, it just made this thing come alive, and I was like, oh, have a look at this, what music does.
Yeah, right.
So it was really, I mean, I suppose I knew music had a power before that, but it really made me excited about the power of music to create emotion. Yeah,
music and visuals together is very powerful. That's awesome. And you got some awesome people involved in that. So
and everybody I asked just said yes. So the musicians were really giving. You know, some people even wrote purpose written songs for the documentary, and it was the same for the CD that came later, and it was just really fantastic.
Yeah, cool. So what are some other? Well, I'm thinking about the audience who's listening to this, like musicians. I mean, I guess in this case, you just reached out to people. You had some connections and you needed some.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about how musicians can think about either having their music on certain things like this, like documentaries or whatever. Do you have any insights to share there? Have people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose that I've always tried to, and I've along the way tried to be fair to musicians too, and where we can, especially for gigs, live gigs pay something. I mean, I know musicians get asked to do everything for free. So it's like, all right, we're not expecting, especially if you're that, starting out or mid-level, and you've got to make an earning. So try to be fair to musicians. It's always not the easiest thing when you're balancing a charity who doesn't have money either. So you kind of almost, there's a parity with musicians and charities in that you're both broke and you're both looking for success.
Yeah. And you're both
people to hear.
doing a lot of stuff for free, hoping it leads somewhere.
Totally. So I suppose we get each other in a lot of ways. I'm not a musician per se, but I suppose I'm creative, and so I've enjoyed that collaborative process with musicians. But for me, as a charity person, I mean, I had no qualms in asking what I thought were the right musicians for music, because I wasn't asking for me. I was asking on behalf of a cause of rangers protecting wildlife. And so if the musician said no, that's absolutely fine. I didn't take that personally. I would say I might be disappointed, but I'd say, okay, thanks, no worries. And even some of the musicians that did say yes had really good plans. And like our friend Wally de Baca Gautier, he chose 3 charities that he would dedicate himself to. And that way he was focused in getting as much return to those 3 charities as possible, rather than being spread over 50 or 100 charities, which were asking someone like him to do. John Butler was the same. John gave us songs and did other things, but he's right now especially very, very big on the anti-fracking, which is absolutely perfect. And they're just honest conversations too when you're a musician, and if you've decided on 1 or 3 causes or more, to just be honest with charities and say, hey, yeah, I'd love to support it, but I'm really focusing my attention on X, Y, or Z so that I can help with this issue. And people like me in my position, the charity should be totally understanding and appreciative of that. I say, okay, that's fine. Thanks for your time. And I've had musicians say that, and I've had the other end where some have been absolutely just rude and obnoxious, and so they've gone lower down in my standings. So I think there's a polite refusal, and then there's just being an obnoxious human being, whether you're a musician or not. So I've met those, and then I've had the other extreme of really, success, what we term successful in terms of, popularity and sales and commercial success, that have been amazingly generous with not just giving a song, but actually giving their time and just to talk to you about what's your charity, tell me more about it. And John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin's one who comes to mind, and Elvis Costello are just were 2 fabulous people that were just really giving of their time and really genuinely interested, and made their kind of touring a bit more interesting to talk to someone like me.
Yeah, exactly.
So I suppose the advice would be, if there's advice at all, would be for musicians to find what you're passionate about and either approach the charity and say, hey, if you need stuff, I'm happy to write something for you, or that's always appreciated, especially if you're about to do something, if you're about to do a release, or if you're releasing a song or an album, say, look, I'd like to take you along the journey with me as my chosen charity, and wherever I speak, I'll mention you guys as one of my chosen charities. And all of that experience over the 16 years I've been doing this has led me to that second charity, which I'm starting at the moment, One Song for Good. But it's about, and that's about not having a negative impact on the musicians, but allowing a positive conduit for the charity without taking money away from the pockets of musos.
So let's talk about this idea, because you brought this up a while ago and we talked about it, and I thought it was a brilliant idea because, like you're saying, it doesn't take away from the musician in any way. If anything, there's a lot. It's just a win. It's just this win cycle all the way around, like everybody from it. So maybe describe how that works, what it's called, and how it works.
Well, I suppose to premise it, start with why the idea came up, and through all the 15 years of doing work with musicians, with Thin Green Line, asking musicians to do gigs for us, and understanding then, is really positive conversations or informative conversations where the musicians would say, hey, yeah, I could do it, but if I do that gig in that area, I can't come back and do my commercial gig, and therefore I'm going to lose out. Or there was resistance from either the manager or the booking agent to say, it's going to cause problems with selling tickets. Or there might be an agreement with a big festival that you can't do a performance within the year space in that area because they're paying big dollars. And so there's all these complications always. And so I really appreciated musicians when they really stretched it. And I really appreciated dealing with musicians who are independent because they can make calls on their own without being beholden to bigger contracts and things. So that's an important lesson perhaps for up-and-coming musicians is independence of choice when it comes to charities and doing charity gigs. Anyway, that long story short, I also understood that I had to be sensitive that I wasn't taking away from musicians' livelihoods and dealing with bands at every level, right through to international stardom, right down to people doing the very small community gigs. They all had different complications, and so those discussions led to the idea of One Song for Good, which is rather than me asking you to play a gig for Thin Green Line, that I would actually, and I've expanded to include 5 streams of charity. So, wildlife protection, climate crisis, refugees, refugee action, Indigenous rights in action, and women's rights in action. So there's 5 main streams. And what happens is rather than me saying, come and do a gig for us or give me a song or something like that, we say, whatever normal gig you're going to play, whether it be, in COVID-19 online or whether it be when we get back to doing live gigs, just dedicate one song in your set to your chosen stream. So if you're passionate about refugees, choose that stream. We'll choose the charities. You can nominate a charity and we'll consider it. But we'll have that charity there for maybe 3 months or 6 months or whatever period of time we decide. But every bit of funds in that stream that every musician chooses in that stream will go to that charity to do their core work. So what happens is there's nothing from the front door for the musician. There's nothing from the merch table from the musician. It's one song. So at the start of that song, chosen by the band or the artist in the gig, they say, hey guys, just before I hit this next song, I just want to say we're going to raise as much money as on the song. We'll see. It's going to go to refugees' rights, or it's going to go to climate crisis or wildlife protection, whatever they choose. And let's see how much we can raise in one song. There's going to be buckets passed through the crowd, and I've got this design that has a donation bucket with an FPOS attached, so no one steal that. But also, yeah, that's right. And also, there's an app being developed at the moment, so people can just get on the app and donate in that one song.
Right.
And we'll leave it open for probably 24 hours after, because people get home and tell their friends, and the musicians may post, hey, I just did One Song for Good. You've got 24 hours to post. Now, we've done it 3 times without the high-tech component that we're developing now. And it was really successful with Melbourne's Nikki Bomber's been an ambassador, with Melbourne Ska Orchestra. We did it with the Beautiful Girls, and we did it with one other band. They'll come to me in a moment. And it was really successful. I think $5,000 in one song, $3,000. Yeah. And that was with low technology, with not enough buckets, not with the FPOS. That was just basic. Yeah. Anyway, I started shopping around to people like yourself, but other musicians, and said, hey, guys, what do you think of this idea? And everyone kind of went, you know what? It's so simple, it'll probably work. Yeah. So there's nothing coming out of and there's no resistance now from the manager or the booking agent, because they're not losing any dough. It's not going to affect ticket sales at a future gig or for a future sign-ups for another festival or another pub gig, because we're not actually doing an event. We're just having the space of one song. And at the end of that gig, you, Mijo, get up and say, hey, guys, I just did that for Thin Green Line or for whatever you chose. And guess what? And we hold up the estimated number that we wrote, and you say, before your last song, we just raised $5,000 for climate change in one song. Thanks. And everyone. And when we've done it 3 times, all it did was unite everybody. It united the musician with the crowd with the musician. And as you said, everyone won. Like, the musician feels good. They've done something positive. The manager feels good because no money's gone out of the bank. The booking agent's not upset because they're cut from the door. Yeah, the punters go, we just had a great night out, but we also contributed something a bit more meaningful than just a gig. Yeah. And the other positive about it, it's not so heavy. It's not, the whole night's not about it. It's only just for one song. So you can just do your performance.
Yeah, it's for 3 to 5 minutes.
Or if it's a ska song, 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. That's how you raise more money. Just do extended.
That's right.
Do a 45-minute song. You just
That's right. Well, I have got visions in my head of, like, you know, also musicians challenging each other. So, you know, when we get to the Eddie Vedders of the world or someone like that saying, you know, all right, Pearl Jam, we just raised $200,000 in a song. We challenge Foo Fighters, and Foo Fighters say, let's play a 15-minute song now. We're going to beat them.
That's right.
Or, yeah,
and
whoever it might be.
From the artist perspective too, there's a huge win. Obviously, they get to unify their audience, but also, you know, as far as a branding kind of thing, being connected with an audience and with a charity or whatever, the perception of that is obviously very powerful as well. So
yeah, well, as you know, I mean, like I've never experienced it myself from a musician's point of view. I mean, I've done talks to large audiences. I can only imagine what it's like actually playing a concert where all that energy is coming back to you from a large audience. And so there's a power that comes with standing on that stage, and people are there to see you perform. And so they're listening to what you say. And so with that 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 15-minute ska song, you've got the chance to say, hey guys, I've just got something little to tell you about, and it doesn't have to be too heavy, beating him around the head with it. Just, hey, you know, we can do something good here for just a short little bit, and we'll get on with the rest of our night. And it is part of the night anyway. Yeah. So to me, it's a really kind of inert kind of space for everyone financially, but it's actually quite powerful with the outcomes that come from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea. You've taken all of those objections from booking agents, musicians, from an audience, from the general public or whatever, and you've somehow, like, you know, woven this thing that's like, hey, what about this? And it just works. I really love it. I think it's brilliant. Yeah.
So now if you do say no to it, you are an asshole.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because everyone has, I don't know, everyone's got their resistance to something, you know. Everyone has, like, even, like, you must get this all the time if you're, you know, on the street wanting to get people's attention and you see them, you know, make a beeline just around, you know, charities. And I do it myself, you know.
I hate chuggers. We don't do chugging.
Or whatever, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to this shop.
I'm on the phone.
Sorry. Yeah. And so it also, you know, sort of gets around that as well. Or if it does trigger that response, it's only for a very short period, but it's in such a exciting and safe environment, you know, because then they're having a great time, and then they're like, yeah, great, I'll do this. So it's a very different, like, psychological frame as well.
Yeah, and we, you know, as a charity for Thin Green Line, we've stayed away from the chugging in the streets. I think it's really terrible for the person doing the chugging to be rejected that much in a day, you know. B, I don't think people like to be accosted in that way. And I mean, the stats will show it works. Like, if you want to be, you know, you can, as a charity, chuck $300,000 to it and you probably make $600,000 back. But is it the way you want to go about stuff? You know, like, to me, it's always been at a flat out no, unless you probably did it invited to a space by somebody and you had volunteers doing it, you know. I know stories of some charities which give charities a bad name, but that there's actually organisations set up to do chugging, and they hire, you know, students or backpackers, and they say, no, 100% goes to the charity. And you go, oh, okay, that's good. You sign up your credit card. But the model is that for 18 months, the money does go all to the charity, but the charity then has to pay 93% back to the organisation that's doing the chugging. So really only 7% of your money is going there.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not saying that's for all of the chugging. I'm saying for those that have used those companies.
Right.
But there's some very high-profile charities that have done that, and that gives all charities a bad name. So I don't think we should enter that space. I think people have got enough free will on their computers and going to gigs. And I suppose that's the other thing, Mio, with this giving, the one song for good, is that I want to call it original crowdfunding. So you're actually in a crowd. You're actually with other people. Yeah. Of course, COVID-19's put a kibosh on that for a little while, but when we can actually gather together, and you know, so I'm really proud. Shane Howard from Goanna has joined me on the board as well, so that's really cool. And we'll have supporters, like we'll sign you up as one of the artists to just be in one song. We've got a bunch of other artists that we've already spoken to. They're keen to just actually do the one song as part of their performance. And I just think, there's a lot of power in not being too heavy, but just giving people that space.
Yeah. And so what from, I mean, you've been, like you said, in a way that everything you've done started out kind of as an accident, but you've overcome, you've had to, I'm only guessing you've had to learn just so much, because it's not like you came from a business and you understood, I don't know, financial structures and the law and how it all works.
I was a park ranger.
So what have been some of the major challenges you feel like you've had to overcome that maybe, you know, they almost took you out and you're like, this is too much, I don't want to do this, or this is insurmountable, but, you know, you ended up sort of getting through it to continue?
Yeah, I mean, there's another thing. I was on a 6 a.m. call this morning with overseas, and there's another thing this morning that just is another chip away. It makes you want to go, oh, why am I doing this for? You know, and I suppose that's another similarity with musicians, is that, you know, unless you're passionate about it, you're probably going to wither away and move on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the defining factor. If you're passionate, you'll find a way through, you know. Just even I felt like giving up 100 times.
Yeah.
And I'm sure musicians do too. Like, when's my song going to be heard? When's my voice going to be, you know, when am I going to have that break, or whatever it might be? Can I just earn a living doing this, you know? So I've been through all of that many times. And I suppose for me is that underlying passion that you find a way. And I suppose, like perhaps creative artists, when you do the work I'm doing, you celebrate the highs. You've got to say, wow, you know, that was really cool. But you got to ride the lows, and the highs are higher because you're living your passion, and the lows are lower because you're living your passion. So it's about learning how to kind of, I suppose, ride that high without getting carried away, and about expecting low without being stuck in there, and knowing that you'll come out the other side. And so, yeah, passion's probably the one thing. Marrying that with a bit of smarts and good people around you, and good advice, and then having direction, I suppose, is those three things. So, yeah, passion, smarts, and direction. And then if you kind of roughly stick to that, you'll be buffeted around a bit. But or if we use my analogy of going down the waterfall and down the rapids, you get to come up for breath every now and then, but expect to go down because it'll be fine, and because that's normal.
Setting expectation. But it's interesting, the parallels there, like with musicians too, for sure, just having some smarts, some passion and direction. Because when I came to visit your offices in Melbourne, one of the first things I noticed was you had values and mission. And I know lots of, you know, companies or corporations or whatever do that. But this is something I never thought of as a musician to think about that stuff. And then when I really did consider it, like purpose or mission of what I'm doing, and direction, like being very clear and very strategic as about, you know, what the outcome is or whatever, that it actually made it so much easier to ride those lows, because you could you had this backstop you could fall back onto. So what's been the role of like your values and mission? How does that help? And maybe help I don't know, if anyone's thinking, oh, maybe I'd like to define that for myself, how would you go about, you know, telling them to do that?
Yeah, it's a really good point you bring up. It's a really hard thing to define sometimes, your values, and especially. But the bit about having it on the wall, well, we've got a small number of staff, like only five people and some volunteers as well. So we include as a team. But just having it up there on the wall, even for yourself personally, isn't a bad thing to remind yourself daily, why am I doing this? And then like inside, we got some nice pictures that were donated of some animals that we protect, and we got some pictures up with Jane Goodall, and the fact that some of that ilk is behind us. And
she's an ambassador as well.
Yeah. My son's got to sit on her lap twice. He's lucky, you know. She's done chimp noises to him, and it's great. Amazing. She's a great person, but you know what? Even she gets overwhelmed too. Like, everyone holds her up, and quite rightly, as this dawn of hope. But I've been with her and had a whiskey with her when she's like, going, wow, how do we get through this,
Wow.
But the amazing thing about her is that she's 86 and she tours more than all you musicians. 300 days a year she's on tour at 86, speaking, and everybody wants a piece of Jane. And but she finds a way to keep hope, even when people are even being negative towards her. So she holds herself really well, and that's been a real kind of lesson for me. And I suppose surrounding myself, luckily, with people like her, but others of similar values is a really good reminder of your own values, but also taking the best parts of values from those confidants, from those friends, and saying, well, I really like what you're doing over there. Maybe I should bring that into my value system, because I can see that's really, really cool. So for me, integrity is the number one thing, not to compromise, which can be really hard. Once again, another parallel with the musicians and what I do, we've had to say no to $1 million donation from a major corporation, a very unethical corporation, who wanted to use our branding to greenwash. And I just said, no, it's not even worth taking the meeting. I can't take that money. And it may be like a musician being offered, some what seems to be a lucrative contract, but you're going to have to sell your soul in terms of what you produce and how you do it. And I imagine that'd be a very difficult decision, as it was for me. Well, it wasn't difficult. It was obvious, and I was always going to say the answer I did, but it was difficult to say, well, you've got to say goodbye to that opportunity, not for me, but for rangers that I represent. All right, we'll have to find that $1 million somewhere else, which is a lot of dough. So I suppose the number one thing with the values comes back to integrity, is not to compromise that, because once you compromise your integrity and what you do believe in, then you kind of finish, I think. Or you kind of like, what do I actually stand for anymore? And I suppose there's history full of people that have done that, and I suppose I've done it on occasion. I can't think of examples with the charity, but there's the number one thing is to say, no, I'm doing the right thing here. And I had a really good lesson when I was a kid. I grew up in a poor neighbourhood, but right next to a rich neighbourhood. And I delivered the paper in the poor neighbourhood and went up the hill to the rich people. And at Christmas, the poor people gave me lots of tips. And I didn't get much tips from as I got up the hill. I was a bit confused as a young kid. What's going on? But one of the, not so much wealthy, but one of the prominent people on the hill that gave me a big tip was the Premier of Victoria at the time, John Cain. He'd just passed away. And he knew I was from the other side of the tracks, and he just said, he went for a jog every morning and said, hey, front door's open, go get yourself some brekkie if you need some brekkie, because there were kids in my area that didn't have breakfast and stuff like that. I was like, right, that's a bit strange, the Premier telling me to go in his house. And then I got to know him, and eventually I just wanted to have a sticky beak, and I went in, and sure enough, his wife made me breakfast. And then I learned more about him, that at work as the Premier, he would have his own roll of stamps. This is before emails. That if he sent off a personal letter, he would actually put his personal roll stamps. So he'd pay for it out of his own pocket for any personal letters, and he would use the other roll stamps for anything work-related.
Wow.
Very simple line of integrity. But very clear.
I got goosebumps from that. It's such a simple idea, simple thing, but just the integrity of saying I'm not going to use public money or whatever. Because as you know, in the news, anytime a politician does anything like that, everyone's up in arms because the integrity is just not there. Oh, that's a beautiful story. That's great. Yeah,
well, it was very informing for me. And I think, as I started the foundation too, like the money, I remortgaged the house to pay for the original film, and people had given me quite practical advice and said, well, it's normal for you to take the money from the film that you make from the film to cover your costs for the travel, for the remortgage of the house. And I said, there's a few reasons I don't feel comfortable with that. One is I had a really good time. I really enjoyed myself. So I don't feel right that other people are paying for my trip. Second is I wanted the money to go to the families of the Rangers. That's why I did it. The third was I was a new kid on the block in the charity scene. And, rather than people having to decipher, hang on, what's his formula? Half goes to him and half goes to the charity. I said, no, all of it goes to the charity, and I don't need to get that money back. I probably wasn't so smart because I remortgaged my house another 4 times and sold my car and did all that to keep it going. So now I have no house. But at the same time, they were my choices. And, I suppose it all comes back to a critical lesson I got from an Indigenous elder who said, before I started all of this, he said, life has many opportunities coming past you. because I'm going to ask, because I was asking about Bush Tucker. I was really, when I was a ranger, passionate about Bush Tucker, and I was talking to him about Bush Tucker. I said, teach me, I want to know everything. He said, there's something bigger for you. I said, what? What's big? And he just sort of smiled, and he gave me a lot of compliments, and he just said, young fella, he said, all these opportunities come past you. I'm going to ask you, do you know which one to grab? And he didn't point here, he's pointed here. And he goes, do you know which one to grab, and will you have the courage to grab it? And that kind of stuck with me, and I didn't realise, but that's exactly what I was doing when I went to the prom, met those rangers, came home, made the decision to go overseas, remortgage the house, do all that stuff, set up the charity and go down this waterfall and down these rapids. I was grabbing that thing that I thought I had to grab and do. And come what may with all of that, here we are.
Yeah. I guess that there's some beautiful things in there, just like about mission, I suppose. Like you identified what your mission was, or it was revealed to you, or whatever, and integrity, but also adventure. Like it has turned your life into quite an exciting adventure. And I'm sure, being a ranger is an incredible, beautiful adventure as well. And I suppose it just, because even the metaphors you're using, like going over a waterfall like that, just get these Indiana Jones type images of like having a real life's adventure. And I think life is an adventure. I think we do have to go on an adventure to discover ourselves and discover some treasure to bring into the world.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. I don't know about the Indiana Jones, the bit. I'll have to get the hat for that. I've given a few of those away. But you did remind me of that saying about, boats, being safe harbours. That's not where they belong. And so, life's short. So I suppose the thing, and maybe I'm getting so far away from the musician and charity thing, but maybe it's pertinent too, is that when the big decisions have come up for me, I kind of developed this thing called the old man's breath test, where I'm pretending I'm my old version of me. Hopefully, I get into my 80s or something, whatever that might be. Anyway, and you imagine that you're looking back at the decision you made right now, but you're taking yourself into the future as your old self. And pretend you're on your deathbed and you're actually breathing your last breath, and literally hold your breath. And think about this decision, like when I had to sell my house. Should I sell my house? I know I'll never be able to buy again because the prices are going up. And I did the old man breath test 9 times. It's amazing what that does, because the old man looks back at yourself now and wants to think you did the thing of integrity, that you did the thing that was your calling, not the thing you did out of fear, because that old version of you is not fearful anymore. That old version of you is just, I hope you had the balls to do the right thing,
Yeah.
And so if you do that 10 times, and 9 out of 10 times, that old version of yourself says, I would have liked you to have done that. There's kind of your answer.
Yeah.
So it takes fear out of it. And from there, it doesn't mean it's easy. It just means that's probably what you should be going for. And whether it works or it doesn't work, you won't have regrets that you didn't give it a crack.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's really powerful. And I definitely see that being related to music stuff. I think about, all the stuff I do in music, but also, run creativity workshops for other artists. And a big part of that is, they're asking themselves the question, why am I doing this? Is this worthwhile doing? In the workshop, I do a similar kind of exercise like that. And I think about it as regret minimization. Like that. I'm in the job of helping people minimize their future regret. Yeah. By really, checking in with what am I really here for? What do I really want to do? How will I get to the end of my life and feel proud of what I've become and what I've done or whatever? So I think it's very relevant to artists, musicians, people running.
I can imagine for people like yourself, directly related to creative arts. I mean, those questions come up all the time, those doubts, especially. I've got friends that are musicians. I've seen those doubts come up for themselves, like, am I good enough? What am I doing this for? Blah, blah, blah. But I suppose when you do that thing, that test, it kind of lets you know what you should be doing. And also be prepared for the old self to give you the other answer, that you want to have this romantic version of yourself, but the old self might say, don't be a freaking fool.
Yeah.
So it could go the other way. But but yeah, maybe it's one way of giving yourself some clear thinking about stuff and taking all the fear and emotion out of it and just going with what's pure. And somewhere along, once you start that journey, then maintaining that integrity along the way, and whatever values are important to you, just hold on to those tight like they're a life raft. Because if we go back to that water analogy, because it's what keeps you afloat in the end.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thanks, man. This has been a great conversation, and it's done everything that this podcast is about for me, which is like the music aspect, but really not just, I don't know, play a chord like this and do that, but how to kind of live life and, really go for it. And you're just such a great example of that.
Well, you're teaching me great things too, Mio. And, seeing Paul McCartney with you while I was drinking and you were being stone cold sober, I think you've got a much better memory of Paul McCartney than I do. So, although I did enjoy it.
Yeah, you did. But I can tell you that you did. That was a great concert.
That was amazing. It was amazing, and a really a well cherished experience for me to share with you as well. Yeah. And but I suppose the point of that is that we were all trying to refine ourselves the whole way along, and only a fool would say they've got it all covered. And I've learned some things by taking some what people would call brave steps, but I would just call them maybe heart steps. Like just doing what I thought was the right thing to do. And I'm happy to learn from you and others, and we'll see where all this whole journey takes us.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, I look forward to the future with you involved, and I'll direct people to the Thin Green Line. Is there anything you want to direct people's attention to at the moment?
Oh, well, I mean, we've just got a campaign at the moment. It's about to start, about trying to get people to consider giving monthly so we can plan our giving. We've got World Ranger Day coming up on July 31st. So even if it's not about money, just holding a sign saying, I stand with the world's Rangers, to show them you're in solidarity with them.
Yeah.
That's coming up July 31st. And people just go to Thin Green Line website. Just Google that, and or go to the social media channels. You'll see a lot about that happening in July.
Yeah.
And just know that Rangers out there are kind of they're not treating the symptoms of everything we're seeing with the virus and the fires. They're actually at the cause, trying to stop it from happening in the first place. So they're on the front lines of conservation, and a lot of people I represent and work with are actual true heroes on this planet. And the more of us that can get behind them, the better we're going to be as a whole humanity. And we won't be putting band-aids on symptoms. We'll be treating the root causes. So that's probably where I'd get to.
Yeah. Awesome work, man. Well, have an awesome day.
All right, brother. Yeah, cheers, man.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sean Willmore. As I said in the intro, he is a very gregarious, positive, inspiring human being. He's figured out how to put these things together of creativity and art and music to help raise funds for really important things. So if you want to go check out his charity, his foundation, the web address is thingreenline.org.au. I highly recommend you go check out what they do, and if you want to get involved in any way, please do that. One great thing is the integrity of the person who's running that foundation, and that all those funds get used really, really wisely and efficiently, which is not always the case in all charities, unfortunately. But I highly recommend you go check that out. And if you want you want to go deeper into any of the music that I've been working on with Sean, you can go to mijobiscan.com, where you can either get a free download of a couple of tracks to hear what that all sounds like, or you can buy a signed CD and I'll ship it to you anywhere in the world. Apart from that, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, wherever you're watching this or listening to this, give it a thumbs up, give it a rating on iTunes, leave us a comment, join the conversation. The conversation really begins at this point. So the podcast is really an opportunity to talk about something that's interesting, but I really want to continue the conversation with you. So you can email me, leave a comment, send me an audio message, do whatever you like. And look forward to catching you on the next episode. Have a great day. See ya.